After a year or two, or even more abroad, you find that not only have you gained some incredible experience, but you've also fallen in love and gained a partner or spouse from your new home. The two of you have decided to return to Canada, and now comes the fun part. Assuming that your new partner is a foreign national to Canada, you will now need to deal with a complex and potentially confusing Canadian immigration process. In this series, we ask one of Canada's most respected immigration lawyers some of the questions that are often on people's minds. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Marina Sedai. Marina's firm, Sedai Law, is based out of Surrey, BC. She has been practicing immigration law exclusively since 2005 and is a past national chair of the Canadian Bar Association's immigration section. She joins me in this series answering questions about the process of bringing a foreign national partner or spouse back to Canada. Marina, welcome back to the sixth and final episode in this series of immigration.
Thank you for having me back. I've enjoyed the series greatly. And I'm happy to answer more questions.
Great. Last week, we spoke about children and potential mistakes in an application. I've got another couple of questions. One is about parents. Can a couple bring parents back to Canada with them?
Possibly, but probably not. So the parents cannot be included on the spousal sponsorship. So a foreign national spouse or a common law partner who's being sponsored can include their children on the application, but they can't include their parents. So if the parents come back to Canada, they're coming to Canada as temporary residents. And there's three ways to be in Canada. As a temporary resident, that's visitor, student, or worker. As a permanent resident, or as a citizen. Those are the only ways. So presumably the parents are going to be coming in as visitors. Now, if they're from a country that is visa required, that can get a bit trickier, but might be possible. If it's not visa required, then it might be a bit easier because the visa is about, it's that extra layer on the application to come to Canada where the Canadian government is saying, prove to us that we can trust you. So sometimes it's hard to prove that even though people are trustworthy. Now, the other issue is, what's the intention of the parents? If they're coming as visitors, they should only have temporary intention. But if they're like, we're moving back with the family, that's a problem because they might actually have permanent intent. And permanent intent is prohibited unless one has a permanent resident application that has been approved. Of course, there's something else called dual intent, where one has temporary intent and they're also in the process of applying for permanent residence. That's permissible. And so it's quite challenging to bring parents right away. Sometimes it's better for them to come later. Now, if one wants to bring parents permanently, the intention is to move them here, then they should do an application to sponsor them. That requires that the sponsors in Canada, there's an income requirement, a Canadian income requirement, primarily. And it's a process that has not gone smoothly with the government for several years now. They're trying to control, they have immigration levels. That means how many immigrants will they accept each year. And parents and grandparents have a little bit smaller piece of the pie. So they have to control the number of persons who apply in that class. And so getting access to that class to successfully sponsor a parent has been tremendously challenging, and the government is working on a new system. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but hopefully it'll be the fairest system yet. So bringing the parents requires a lot of planning, and it's really unique to each case.
Fantastic information. Now, what should someone do if they're applying, or I guess I should rephrase this. Should a couple get legal advice all the time and representation. And the second part to that question would be, what happens if they can't afford to hire a lawyer? They don't have that sort of budget.
Right. Yes, not everyone can afford to hire a lawyer. So the first thing is, absolutely, it's important that people get at least that 1 hour of summary advice. If they can't afford any more than that, that's their situation. But it can make a huge difference. Which class do they apply in? Are there complications in their case that they wouldn't have understood? Can they sort of be given a sense of how to go about their application? So that 1 hour of summary advice is incredibly important. For people who are who have a low income and are in Canada, there are pro bono clinics all across Canada. Now, we have a strict rule ourselves. We volunteer a lot with pro bono endeavors with the public, but we don't do it at our office. We do it for example, in British Columbia, Access Pro Bono. So folks can go to those clinics more than once if they financially qualify and get 30 minutes of free legal advice. There's also something called the lawyer referral service. And that is, at least last time I checked, one paid $25 or $30 for a half hour of advice, and they could get help that way. So there's ways to get legal advice. Now, I put a footnote on this. Be careful who one gets legal advice from. So, A, go to a lawyer. B, that lawyer should be somebody who lives and breathes immigration. With respect to people who have lawyers who have a multidisciplinary practice, they're getting less exposure to the immigration applications than somebody who only does that or does that in large part. So, certainly check out the person online, go to the provincial or territorial law society pages and look up that lawyer by their name. And it'll say, A, is that person really a lawyer? Because there are many people who pose as lawyers. It's a constant thing. I have quite often people coming to me saying, oh, I got legal advice from a lawyer. And they didn't. And they're shocked to find out that wasn't a lawyer. So be careful. And they can also, on law society pages, make sure that the lawyer is in good standing. In addition to getting legal advice, it really depends on the case whether one should or shouldn't hire a lawyer. If they, for people who struggle with paperwork, emotionally, it might be overwhelming or they don't have much experience with it, and that alone can be a good reason to get legal assistance. For other people, they're fine with paperwork, but they're busy people. They don't have the time. And this isn't something to rush through. So in those cases, they may very well. We're often hired because people just want someone to save them some time, and that's fine. So we have sophisticated, unsophisticated clients. That's fine. Now, sometimes people have some money. They might be able to get some help, but they really don't have the means by which to have full representation. So many lawyers will only fully represent because there's few liability reasons for that. They want to make sure that they're managing the process and everything is done correctly. There are other lawyers, like at our firm, but there are others as well, who do something called a limited scope retainer agreement. And that means that under certain conditions, so that everyone is kept safe and the application is protected, there can be some ongoing advice while the couple does their own application. And we're checking over the forms, etc. Now, when we do that, we reach an agreement that the couple will not send out the application until we've reviewed it a number of times and we give our final okay, because we don't want to be looking at paperwork and saying, okay, here's some things to correct. They correct that and send it off. And meanwhile, it hasn't really all been reviewed yet. It depends. The relationship has to be right with the lawyer. It has to be the right person. who is really fairly well prepared to do their own application, and they just need some guidance through the process. And we're very honest with people when they come in. There are people who I say, there's a complication in your case. You should not be handling this by yourself. And other people where I'm like, your case is very straightforward. You have no complications. We're happy to give you advice as you ask for it. But otherwise, if you're comfortable doing it, go ahead and do it yourself. So it comes down to the individual case. And there's something that is very important, I think, to all lawyers who I know. And that is, legal services are bought, not sold, as they say. So it's part of our professional ethics to never be convincing someone to spend legal fees that they might not need to. We shouldn't be letting people go off on their own when they're ill prepared to do that. We should tell them to get representation. But there are other times where, we can reassure them that they're okay on their own. There are others under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, under the legislation, that are allowed to give legal advice. That's registered immigration consultants, and in Quebec, notaries. And the Quebec notaries have a very good reputation. Immigration consultants, there are some excellent ones out there, particularly those who were former government officers. There are some serious concerns, though, so make sure that if you do choose an immigration consultant, that you know their history, that they are in good standing, that everything is very transparent. You know the individual with whom you're working, their name, etc., and you know their credentials. And bear in mind that they won't be able to assist you with anything related to litigation. So lawyers can do everything. Quebec notaries and immigration consultants can help with applications. So just, a word of caution to everyone out there. There are a lot of people in this world who are actually fraudsters. They are posing as, sometimes they pose as lawyers. Very often they're posing as immigration consultants, and they're not registered. And not only do they give bad advice as a rule because they're unethical, but they will, it'll get you into trouble with the department. There's something called ghost consulting. If you get representation or advice from someone, you have to let the government know that you did that. If somebody is helping you and they don't want to be visible on the application, run the other way. So definitely stay safe. And you know what? Second opinions. We all hear this all the time, but it's so important. I encourage people who come to us, especially with complicated cases, look, go out, get another opinion, get 2, 3, 4, it doesn't matter. Go out and get the opinions, because this is your life. This is keeping your family together. This is sometimes related to employment. Everything that's important. So there's nothing wrong with getting several opinions.
Marina, thank you so much for all your time. You've been a tremendous help.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If your questions are a bit more specific or perhaps complex, Sedai Law would love to hear from you. They're there to help. Make sure that you mention that you watched this episode. Their contact info is in the description. This is a series about immigration and is published every Thursday. Make sure that you like this video and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any episodes. Until next time.